The sumptuous dining room of the luxurious five-star restaurant sparkled under crystal chandeliers, filled with laughter, polished silverware, and the delicate notes of a live piano playing in a corner. Elegant men in tailored suits and women in shimmering dresses moved with ease, every gesture carefully calculated to display wealth and refinement. But amidst this dazzling exhibition of sophistication, a woman sat silently at a corner table, her presence commanding even in her silence. She wore a simple dark kimono-style dress that spoke more of dignity than fashion. Silver hair, carefully arranged, framed a face marked not only by age but by years of experience and wisdom. Her hands trembled slightly as they rested on the tablecloth, clutching a small pendant at her chest. She was a millionaire. Everyone in the room knew it. Whispers had spread among the guests the moment she entered. "She's the Japanese entrepreneur who built an empire in Tokyo," some murmured. "She's here in New York on investment matters," others speculated. Yet, despite the awe her presence inspired, there was something surprisingly different about her that evening. She wasn't surrounded by assistants or interpreters. She had come alone, and when the waiter brought her the menu, her eyes moved over the English words with growing confusion. She opened her mouth, attempted to form a sentence, but her voice faltered. She could only manage a few broken phrases in heavily accented English that no one around her seemed to understand. The atmosphere in the room changed. Some guests tried to hide their smirks, others simply shook their heads. Even the restaurant staff struggled, exchanging embarrassed glances as they failed to comprehend her requests. What had started as admiration soon transformed into an uncomfortable spectacle. She, a woman of immense wealth and power, was suddenly vulnerable, trapped in a world where her voice could not reach anyone, and in her eyes, beneath the veil of composure, there was a glimmer of loneliness that no amount of riches could erase. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the small gestures of humanity that can change someone's world, please take a moment to like this video, share it, and subscribe. Your support helps us bring more powerful and realistic stories that touch the heart. As the evening continued, tension at her table grew. The waiters did their best, pointing at items on the menu, speaking louder as if volume could overcome the barrier. But this only left the woman more distressed. She shook her head gently, her hands trembling more visibly now, until finally she lowered her gaze, clutching the pendant tighter, as if silently wishing that someone, anyone, would understand her. At that moment, in the background, a young waitress was observing. She wasn't part of the elite staff usually assigned to VIP guests. She was one of the newest hires, often tasked with clearing glasses, bringing water, and handling the tables no one else wanted. Her uniform was simple, her ponytail slightly disheveled from the rush of the evening, and her name tag read simply, Michela. For most of the evening, she had moved quietly, hoping not to attract the scrutiny of her stricter supervisors. But as she watched the woman struggle, something inside her stirred. A memory of her grandmother who used to sit at the kitchen table, speaking only Japanese, while Michela, as a child, tried to understand. Michela had grown up with a Japanese grandmother who had never quite mastered English, not even after decades spent in Italy. Many evenings, she remembered sitting by her side, practicing the language her classmates never understood, translating her grandmother's words when others grew impatient. She had always considered it a quiet part of her identity, a skill she carried almost in secret, rarely finding the occasion to use it. But now, standing in this opulent restaurant, watching the dignified woman shrink under the weight of incomprehension, Michela understood that perhaps she was the only one who could reach her. She hesitated for a moment, glancing at her manager who was already whispering with another waiter in frustration. It wasn't her table. She shouldn't intervene. But her heart pushed her forward. Gathering courage, she headed toward the woman's table. The other diners watched, curious, as this young waitress, clearly out of her element among the suited waiters and white tablecloths, approached the table and gently bent down. She looked into the woman's eyes with warmth and spoke softly in Japanese. The transformation was instant. The older woman's eyes widened, shining with disbelief. For a second she seemed frozen, and then, as Michela repeated herself, the woman's lips parted and tears filled her eyes. Relief washed over her face like sunlight breaking through clouds. For the first time all evening she smiled. Words poured from her, fluid and graceful, and Michela responded with ease, bridging a gap that moments before had seemed impossible. The room fell into stunned silence. The diners who moments earlier had whispered and smirked now leaned forward in wonder. The Japanese millionaire, once isolated and misunderstood, was now laughing softly, her voice rich with gratitude as she spoke with Michela. The waitress listened patiently, translating her food preferences to the chef, ensuring her comfort with gentle attention. The simple act of being understood had transformed the evening, restoring dignity to a woman who had been made to feel small despite her wealth. As the night went on, Michela stayed by her side whenever needed, helping her through the meal, making sure she felt cared for. The other guests couldn't take their eyes off the scene, the powerful lesson unfolding before them. In a world obsessed with status, wealth, and appearances, it wasn't the expensive clothes or refined accents that brought comfort, but the quiet compassion of a young waitress who remembered her grandmother's language. The millionaire woman was no stranger to being admired for her fortune. People bowed to her success, praised her empire, and courted her investments. But that evening was different. That evening, she was reminded of something far more precious, the simple gift of human connection. She took Michela's hand before leaving, holding it with a strength that belied her age. Tears slipped down her cheeks as she whispered words that only Michela understood, words of gratitude that transcended language. When the woman finally left, escorted by her driver, the restaurant buzzed with hushed conversations. Some guests were humbled, others inspired. Even Michela's stern manager, who had frowned at her earlier, seemed to soften, realizing that what she had done was more valuable than any perfectly folded napkin or polished glass. But the story didn't end at that dinner table. A few weeks later, Michela received a letter at the restaurant. Inside was a handwritten note in Japanese, along with an invitation. The millionaire woman had requested her presence at a cultural foundation event in the city. She wanted Michela to be there, not as a waitress, but as a guest of honor. And attached to the invitation was a scholarship offer. The woman had discovered that Michela was studying languages at community college and struggled to afford tuition. The letter explained that she wanted to sponsor Michela's education, to support the voice that had once reached her when no one else had. Michela cried when she read the letter. She hadn't thought her small act of kindness would ever matter beyond that evening, but it had changed her life. The millionaire woman had given her more than financial help. She had given her confidence, the confirmation that her heart and her heritage were gifts worthy of being honored. Years later, Michela would find herself on stages as a professional translator, traveling across countries, connecting cultures and languages, always remembering the night it all began. She often recalled the tears in the Japanese woman's eyes, the silence that had fallen over a room full of wealthy strangers, and the powerful truth that had been revealed. Dignity and kindness are worth more than riches, and sometimes the smallest voice can have the greatest impact. If this story has touched your heart, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your engagement helps us continue creating stories that remind the world of the power of empathy, kindness, and human connection. And before we conclude, please comment below. Have you ever experienced a moment when someone's kindness broke down a barrier in your life? We'd love to hear your stories, because in the end, what people remember most is not how much we own, but how much love we share.